What happens if you could feel instant joy within like the next 5 minutes? Because I'm going to give you five ridiculously simple things that you can do that give you this just instant deep joy. And it's crazy to think that it's like within our grasp. But so often what we do is when we're feeling a bit low or despair or we're looking for a little boost, we turn to things that actually make life worse for us. And so I want to fix that for you today. Welcome to A Little Nudge. My name is Derek, and for the last 3 decades I've been helping people who've wanted to deepen their faith or even to explore faith. And so in these videos on this channel, I just give you out little nudges, little tools that you can use to live a deeper and a more meaningful life. And so we all want to feel more joy, and we all want to feel a bit more content in any moment, and it is within reach. And I want to just give you 5 things that you can do at any moment to instantly just feel that deep sense of joy and contentment. But we need to first realize that there's a difference between feeling deep joy and having a kind of dopamine spike of pleasure. And often what we do without thinking about it is we turn to these kind of dopamine inducing hits, whether it's caffeine, whether it's coffee, whether it's alcohol, whether it's scrolling on our phones, whether it's binging Netflix or whatever it might be. And when you think about it, when you turn to a lot of those sorts of things, they do like 3 things. And the first thing they do is the feeling doesn't last. Secondly, there's often a negative health impact. We're either sitting down or we're consuming stuff that we know does damage to our body. But thirdly, when we finished it, we actually feel worse than when we started. I mean, if you've ever spent 2 hours scrolling reels on Instagram, you never feel at the end a lot better than when you started. If you get dragged into binge watching something that you didn't intend to watch, you can feel actually a bit ashamed that you've wasted your time. If you drink too much, turn to chocolate, caffeine or whatever. And so I want to give you 5 things that don't just boost our dopamine but give us this deep sense of joy. And it's something that lasts. It has positive health benefits rather than negative health benefits. And they're not big and complicated. You can just do them very instantly. So let's dive into the first one. And the first one comes from this book here. This book changed my life when I read it about 4 years ago. And I'm starting to do a series of videos on books that changed my life. And this will definitely be one that I will come to. But let me give you their main idea right now, and you can do something with it. And what they identify in the book, The Gap and the Gain, by Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy, if you want to check it out, is they think that we often sabotage our own happiness. We sabotage our joy and contentment because we have this predictable pattern. And see if you can recognize this. We have something that we want. Now, that may be something we buy, or a project, or a career situation, or we want to start dating, or we want to get better at a hobby, or we want to achieve a certain status. We have something that we want, and we create a gap between where we are now and where we want to be. And that creates a sense of dissatisfaction and happiness, but it motivates us to take action. It kind of energizes us, which means it can be a good thing. And then we take action to close that gap. So we may work hard to get a qualification on to improve our skill. We may change our way that we dress because we want to start dating. We want to change our health, so we change eating. Or we train harder because we want a fasting running time. Whatever it might be, we have this gap and we change action to close the gap, which reduces our unhappiness. It brings us joy and a real sense of achievement and contentment. But what they spot in The Gap and the Gain is when you close that gap, we then instantly open up a new gap, and we don't stay very long in that place of whatever we've achieved. For a short time, we're happy with our career or the thing that we bought, or we're happy with our level of subscribers if we're running YouTube. We're happy for a moment, but then we start to look ahead at the next peak, at the next thing we want to do. We compare ourselves to other people, and another gap opens up in front of us. And so what they say is often we spend nearly all of our time living in our gap. If you think about your weight or your eating pattern, if you think about your income, or you think about your marriage or your kids, if you think about any of those things, you probably live in the gap between where you are and where ideally you'd want to be. One of the big shifts we can make, and just it only takes a minute to do this, is rather than focusing on the gap, they encourage us to focus on the gain, focus on the progress that we might have made. And you can do this kind of in a moment. You can do it as a weekly activity or monthly, that you just like do a review and think, actually, what progress have I made in my health or in my eating or in my online presence or my relationship? What progress have I made in a marriage? What good times have I had as a parent in the last week? I was running a staff meeting recently where I work, and I got people to think about the last 5 years. And I said, I want you to think about all the areas of progress you've made in the last 5 years in terms of maybe your finances or your character or things that you've overcome, new things that you've learned, how you've grown as a person, how your career progressed, what friendships you've got, you know, any area of life. And just give people maybe 5 minutes to think about how they'd grown and developed. And people were blown away by the number of changes and growth areas they'd had. And then I asked this question. I said, how often do you think about that? How often do you think about the progress that you've made? How often do you live in that gain? And everyone admitted, hardly ever. So you can do it at any moment. Maybe you switch this video off right now and think about, in the last 6 months, what have I gained? How have I progressed? How have I developed? And you instantly switch into a place of joy and contentment at the stuff that's happened. So last week I had to go to hospital to take my son. He's an adult, but he'd strained his back and he was in a lot of pain lying on the ground. He said, Dad, you really need to take me to hospital. So we go to the hospital, and as he signs in, he gets asked a number of questions by the receptionist who's filling this form in. And one of the questions she asked him, she said, marital status, are you single, are you married? And Tom turns to her and he said, I'm single. Sorry. He said, I'm single as a Pringle, right? And so she laughs and she said, you're supposed to say, I'm single and ready to mingle. And then he's like, yeah, I'm that as well. And we chuckled and she filled the form in, etc. And I was thinking about that the next day, about how that little connection brought a little moment of joy. And it wasn't just the fact that there was a joke between us. And when we think about connection, and connection is our next way that we can create joy and happiness, we think about like deep conversations with people, or we need to be talking to someone that we've known for a long time, or something like that. But scientists have discovered research that says actually little tiny interactions with people we don't know very well, what they call social snacking, can have quite a big impact on our mood and our depression and our happiness. And it releases the chemicals oxytocin into us. And there's a book called The Loneliest Century, and I remember reading that, and they were talking about how these little interactions, even though we don't really know people that well, but at the bus stop or on the bus or on the train or maybe in a shop or someone we don't particularly know at our workplace, and we have those light conversations about the weather or weekend or whatever. And the research is that actually contributes to our happiness, our sense of belonging and connection. And The Loneliness Century kind of raises questions about, you know, automated shops and where we don't speak to anyone and all that sort of stuff. But it made me think about this idea of actually, if you just connect with somebody in a light way, it can really change your mood. It can really affect your joy and happiness in the moments. And the Bible talks a lot about giving attention to each other, encouraging each other, speaking to each other, welcoming each other, listening to each other. And it doesn't always mean in a deep share your deepest secrets with your closest friend. It means in the every busyness of everyday life. And so the action here is whenever you see someone, maybe you walk across them in the road, in the park, or you see someone in the workplace that you don't know at all really, it's find a way to have a one-sentence conversation. So I don't want you to kind of open up and try and make them your friend and be all weird about it. Or if you're in the shop and you see someone serve you and they've got a name badge on, just say, thank you, Jemima, if that's their name. Or I go out running a lot and walking in my local area and often see people maybe with a dog or with a child or something like that, and I always try and find one sentence to say to them, knowing that just boosts our mood and it helps us feel connected and belonging to the place in which we're in. Okay, I need to confess something to you. I knew I was going to record this video this morning when I got up, and I was feeling a bit fed up about it. I find it quite hard work. Sometimes you've got to set up and you've got to motivate yourself to speak and think about what I'm going to say, etc. And as I was getting ready, I started to think about all the videos I've made, and I started to think about the hundreds or even thousands of people who've watched some of them and some of the comments I've had and some of the interactions. And I started thinking, you know what, wow, I get to do that. Like, I get to share something and someone might be helped and they'll send me a message potentially. And like, I get that time. That's a bit of a gift, and I've got this technology, I can do it. And I started to appreciate it a bit more. And kind of grumbling drains, doesn't it? But gratitude kind of fills us up, and it's easy to do kind of the wrong one of those. And at any moment you can just change your thinking and think, actually, what am I grateful for in this situation or in this week? What has happened? And it's the easiest and quickest hack where you can just change your perspective. And kind of, you already know this, but the challenge is that bad things happen loudly, but good things happen quietly. Yeah, if you get criticized by somebody at work, or if your manager pulls in, or if you get like a massive bill that you didn't expect, you don't have to work hard to draw your attention to it. It screams and it grabs your attention, and actually it's hard to let go of it and get rid of it. But sometimes the good things, maybe someone cooked us a meal, or we've got a wage this month and we can pay some of our bills, the house we live in, the world we live in, the relationship we have with our kids, friends we have, the hobbies we have, the skills that we have. The quiet things can just be part of our lives, and they're very quiet. And that's why if Flick Our Mood is about being intentional of directing it from the noisy stuff to maybe some of the quiet stuff. And in the Bible, particularly those writers who are helping the early church decide to follow Jesus, there's so many verses where they keep saying you've got to give thanks in all circumstances. Remember to give thanks for everything. Ephesians 5:20 says that. And we can think about, sometimes people object and say, what is it with this God who's always wanting thanks and he's wanting praise and he's saying, show me respect, and he's like this egotistical boss almost. But when you look at all the evidence around what gratitude does for us, and even your own experience in the moment, if you shift from what you haven't got to what you have, it does you so much good. It almost unlocks a more abundance experience of life. It unlocks life for us in a way. And so it almost seems like that's about us finding our proper position in life of giving thanks. It's almost for our benefit as much as for God's benefit. And I think the ideal of what you're looking for is you want to lower your threshold of what makes you feel grateful. You don't want to have a big thing that happens in order to make you feel grateful. You want to be able to train yourself to see more and more about the little things in life. So even the little thing that happens, it can make you feel so grateful. And you might want to put a note on your desk or set an alarm or have a rhythm and routine of when you try and think of what you're grateful for the week or for the month, because otherwise you'll just have the loud things, the bad things that are screaming in your life and scream. Okay, here we go. Number 4 way to instantly create some joy. And I used to have a sign in my house, in my office, and I was trying to find it actually for this video, and I don't know where it's gone, but I used it a lot in lockdown, and it said this. It says you're only one run away from a good mood. You're only one exercise away from a good mood. And I used to look at that in lockdown. If I was feeling down or struggling, I'd go for a run or I'd go for a walk. I'd just move my body. And there's kind of this rule. There's this verse in the Bible in 1 Corinthians 6:19 where it says that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, that our bodies are a temple in which the Spirit of God dwells. And from that we get this rule of life almost, where our body can be in control of our mind and our emotions and our spirit, that it kind of obeys it. So if you slouch in your chair, we know, like in job interviews, we struggle to have energy or confidence. If you walk confidently, you can feel confident. We know from evidence that if you smile, actually you feel better, that your emotions and your spirit and your mind obey your body. So you just need to do something with your body to have that knock-on effect. So just by moving it and getting a bit more active, we know that that has an impact on us. I know when I go for a walk, I never come back in a worse mood. And so it's about how you integrate that. Now, I know your lifestyle might be really busy, you don't have time for big walks, but at any moment you could add a bit of exercise when you boil the kettle. At any moment you could say, you know what, I'm just going to take 5 minutes to move. If you work in a big office building, you could say, I'm going to go and get a drink, but you do a little tour of the building. Rather than sitting at your desk at lunchtime, you get out and move. At any moment you could actually just do 5 minutes of movement, and that itself will tell your body to do something. It will have an impact. It's like there at any moment to just use. And you already know this, I know that, but do we ever do it? And I know that sign helped me, and maybe you want to put up a sign or put a note somewhere to remind yourself, actually, you're only one movement away from a good move. Okay, for our last way to instantly boost our joy levels, I need to tell you about a crazy researcher called Dr. Roger Ulrich. And he did some research where he gathered 120 participants in to watch a video designed to induce stress. So they're watching this workplace accident. There was kind of woodworking shop, and there was blood and bits getting chopped off and spilled everywhere. And people watched this to induce some stress. And then what he did is half of them watched a follow-up video, which was just about city streets and people wandering around in a city, in a town. And then the other half watched things related to nature, trees, animals, that sort of thing. And what he found is those that watched nature after the stress recovered from stress 3 times quickly compared to those who just watched every ordinary day life. And he went on to do lots of other research around the impact of nature on us. And he found that nature heals us, it brings more joy, it gets rid of toxins in us, and all sorts of ways. And in the woodworking stress experiment, they didn't even encounter nature, they just watched it on a video. And he's found like when people see it or experience it or touch it, nature has this massive impact on us, a healing thing and a way of bringing joy. And there's a really interesting verse in the Bible, in Romans 1 verse 20, that says this: through everything that God's made, we can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. And a lot of nature researchers have been investigating what is it about nature that brings healing and brings us joy. Is it the shapes? Is it the colours or the ions or the smells? And this verse says actually through everything God's made, you can see something of his presence and who he is. And I think that when we encounter nature, we encounter something of God. And that's why it's so healing and de-stressing. And so there's loads of ways you can do this. You could just have a picture in your office or in your house, or you can have plants. You can deliberately spend time looking out your window. You can walk and change where you walk, so you walk past trees or past parks rather than towns and cities. You can just go and sit outside for a period. There's all sorts of things that you can do, but it doesn't need to be a 3-hour hike in the wilderness. Even 5 minutes looking at a plant or looking at a nature documentary, you stick that on YouTube for 10 minutes in the middle of your day, is proven to have a massive impact in our stress and in our joy. So there you go, 5 things you can do very quickly to get a deeper sense of joy, and you could easily incorporate some of them into every day. You can write up little notes to remind yourself and do them and just get this kind of instant joy. And if you're thinking spiritually, you want to get strong as well, then you want to watch this video here, because I talk through the 5 things that I do every week that really help me to keep on powering on spiritually and keeping myself centered. So watch that video next. But otherwise, thanks for watching and have a great day.